I should have read The Darker Shade of Magic before this. I was just kind of left in the dust. It's not a fantasy. I don't care. I think this book might make my best books of the year list. It's finally time to talk about the Goodreads Choice Awards for 2023. Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Brianna and this is 4 Paws in a Book. I make bookish videos over here on my little corner of the internet, so if that's something that you're interested in, make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. Today I do want to talk about the Goodreads Choice Awards, but I want to do it with a different twist because the main conversation around the Goodreads Choice Awards is that it is a popularity contest, and this year is no exception to that. And I want to take a little bit more of a critical look at it, and since I decided to do fantasy this year, I thought why not try to judge these books as if they were entered into a SPFBO or SPFBO competition. If you've been following my channel for a little bit, I've been very heavily involved in the SPFBO competition. I did SPFBO Cassidy's version last year, and then I got to be part of Cassidy's judging team for this year, which was really, really cool. And I thought, why not use the rubric that we used for SPFBO and use it to read these Goodreads Choice Awards nominees. Now in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the top 10 books. I might do a video in January where I do 10 through or 11 through 20, but today we're just doing the top 10. There are a couple of books that I had read prior to the Goodreads Choice Awards coming out before starting this vlog, so I'll be sprinkling in some sit-down conversations about those books, and then we'll be vlogging the books that I read for this project. Now, the SPFBO competition uses a rubric that has 5 different categories, and you give it a score of 1 to 10 for each of those categories, and then the average of that is kind of your star rating. So that's what we're going to do today. I'll be giving a score for the following 5 categories: characters, plot, world building, writing style, and my personal enjoyment. This is a very similar style to what I use for my own personal ratings. Mine is a little bit more fluid and has a little bit more weight on the enjoyment level of it. This is a little bit more rigid, and there's specific questions that you ask based on each of the rankings that kind of help guide you to your score. But hopefully at the end of this video, I will have the book that I really want to vote for and really want to win, and B, I will have a pretty clear ranking of the top 10 books that Goodreads says are the best fantasy books of the year. Now, Goodreads kind of threw us a little bit of a curveball this year, and I'm kind of glad that they did. So they added a romantasy category. This means that Fourth Wing is not in the category of fantasy, which I definitely thought it was going to be, and books like JLA and Carissa Broadbent are also in that romantasy category, and this kind of gave a little bit of a window for some of the lesser known fantasy books to find their way onto this list, and for that I'm really excited. Now there are some that did not make it into the final 10 that I really, really want to read, and so that's why I might do a video in January. But for this video, let's just talk about the top 10 finalists. The first book that I'm going to be reading for this project is The Fragile Threads of Power by V.E. Schwab. This is a new series in the Darker Shade of Magic world. Now, one of the rules of SPFBO that I'm kind of bringing over to Goodreads is that you can only have standalones or first books in a series. Obviously, there are a couple of sequels on here, which I will talk about, but for this one, it says it's Threads of Power #1. So I am going into this thinking it is the first book in a series. I have not finished the Darker Shade of Magic series, so we'll see how that works out in my favor. This book follows the events of the Darker Shade of Magic series, and there are 3 Londons left over after the corruption. So we have Grey London, White London, and Red London, and these worlds are all about to collide. We have 3 powerful magicians that are discovered in this book, and there is one character in here who can keep all of the worlds from unraveling, but obviously things are not going to be simple. It's not going to be as easy as that. We will see some familiar characters like Lila Bard and Cal, and while I don't know how the Darker Shade of Magic series ended, I am familiar enough with these characters that I think I'll still have a good time with this. I am a hot mess. I have no makeup on and the lights are not great because I'm not setting up my lighting kit just for this vlog update. But I've started my first book, so apologize for the poor lighting and all of that. I've been working out in the yard trying to get like the rain gutters and like the leaves and stuff picked up before it's gonna snow. Anyway, I am 50% of the way through The Fragile Threads of Power by V.E. Schwab. Here is the thing. I did not finish The Darker Shades of Magic. This is a spin-off series with a lot of the same characters in it. I should have read The Darker Shade of Magic before this. I've read the first book, so I'm aware of who the characters are. I'm just not like invested in them, and that I think is the problem, because we never really connect with our characters at the beginning of this story, and there's a lot of characters, and I'm lost and I'm a little bit confused about who people are, and I just don't actually care. So that's the problem. I think that this book is well written, although I will say it's a little bit clunky in the fact that like I'm already on part 7 or something like that, and I'm only halfway through the book. I don't know, I feel like you could have fewer parts. Like most books have like 3, 4, maybe 5 parts, but to be halfway through the book and already through part 7, that's a lot. Let's see how many parts there actually are. Okay, so it looks like there are 12 parts, which is a lot, but maybe they round out a little bit more, because if we're in part 7 and it's halfway through, that means we have less than that. That's how math works. At this point, it feels like a 3-star read. I don't know, the end could like catapult it into something else. And I feel like V.E. Schwab is just very hit or miss for me, because I really loved Addie LaRue and I really liked Vicious as well, although upon reread I may not love it as much. But Darker Shade of Magic I only gave like 3.5 stars to, so this kind of feels on par with that. I don't know, maybe I just don't like this series. But anyway, we're gonna power through. I am gonna put up Christmas decorations today, because if you don't know, my Halloween stuff is still up even though it is November. I just didn't want to like take it down and have empty shelves for 2 weeks. So I just left it up, and now we're gonna put up Christmas. So that's what we're gonna do today, but I'll touch base with you when I'm done with this book. Hello, I am coming to you because I finished Fragile Threads of Power by V.E. Schwab, and I didn't love this, but I think part of that is because I haven't finished Darker Shade of Magic, and like this says it's Threads of Power #1, and so it's the start of a new series, and so if I'm rating things like SPFBO, right, then I have to think of it as its own series, because that's the rule for SPFBO, is that even if it's like in the middle of a larger series, if it says it's book #1, you treat it like book #1. So that's what we're doing, because that's the whole point of this video, is treating these books like SPFBO. So that being said, I'm giving this book 3.5 stars, and I stand by the fact that I think this book is clunky, regardless of the fact that like I didn't know, or I didn't have a connection to these characters the same way. Sorry, there's a sprint going on, just came back. Regardless of the fact of like that I wasn't connected to these characters the way that I would have been had I finished out the Darker Shade of Magic series. Like I knew who they were because I had read the first book, but I hadn't continued on with the series, and so I didn't connect with them. And that stood the entire time. Like I already talked about the fact that like I never felt connected to these characters because the author just kind of assumed that we already knew who they were, which is fine if you had already read the rest of the series. My bigger problem with this book is it's clunky. Like it feels really choppy. There are like 12 parts in this book. Why does a book need that many parts? I don't understand. We would have like 2 chapters and then the next part and then 4 chapters and then the next part. And I don't understand that. I didn't understand the reasoning behind that. That's my problem with this one. Do I think that like people will love this book? Do I think that it deserves to be on this? Sure, absolutely. But personally, I didn't love it. However, let's talk about our rating. So I gave it a 7 for characters, which is like a 3.5, right? If you think about star rating. I gave it a 6 for the plot. I gave it a 7.5 for world building. That is one thing that V.E. Schwab does so well, is connect the world. So agree with that. I gave it a 6.5 for writing and then a 6 for enjoyment. Just because, like, again, I didn't connect to the characters personally because the author just assumed that we already knew who they were. And I didn't, or at least I wasn't as connected. I knew who they were. I wasn't as connected to them because I hadn't spent the last 2 books with them. And that's on me. That's my fault. Should have read it first, but I didn't. So that's where we're at. That makes the average of 6.6, which currently means that it's sitting in the #1 spot. Do I think it'll stay there? I hope not. I really, really hope not, because I hope I have better books than 3.5 stars. The Adventures of Amina Ali is a book that I read earlier in the year, and I had a really good time with it, but I didn't love it as much as I was expecting to. I love the City of Brass series, and I was really hoping for the same type of magic in this. And for me, this one did not work. And I can see why people really do love this, especially if you're someone who is looking for an older main character. This is a getting the band back together type of story with pirates. At the beginning of this book, we are introduced into a character who is supposedly the most badass pirate. She is retired now, but she was this scary pirate, you know, whatever, Queen of the Seas kind of thing. And she's hired to do one final task, and that is to rescue someone's daughter for a high sum. And so, of course, she can't say no. So she gets her crew back together for one last adventure. This book I struggled with because we kept getting told that she is this badass pirate, that she was revered and like people were terrified of her, but we never got any indication as to why or what she had done to gain that title. I would have loved to see some flashback scenes of her being this badass pirate, because there was a lot of telling and not showing. This book also has some serious pacing issues for me. The beginning of the story, as she is going and like collecting her crew and like finding them and trying to get them on board, it's very slow. But then when we get to the 60 or 70% mark, it goes at breakneck speed to the very end. And so like I was just kind of left in the dust. So this is a book that I'll definitely continue the series, but this isn't one that I necessarily loved. So now let's look at the score that I would have given this book had I been ranking it based on the SPFBO categories. So for characters, I'm giving this a 6.5. I do think they were a little bit above average, but I would have loved to see so much more. And had we got some of the flashback scenes, I think that this score specifically would have gone way up. For plot, I'm giving this a 6. If you like adventuring stories, I think this is definitely a book for you, but for me, I just needed a little bit more. It was a little bit too flat, too two-dimensional. For world building, I'm also giving this a 6. It was just kind of middle of the road, and I wanted so much more from it. The writing, I am giving a 7. S.I. Chakraborty does know how to write a book, and I do think that the prose in this book was fantastic. I do think it struggled a bit with the pacing. And then for my enjoyment, I'm giving it a 5.5. This was just an average book as far as my enjoyment rating. So that gives it an average of a 6.2, and that means that it is going to be in the second spot behind Fragile Threads of Power right now. Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson was the first of his 4 Kickstarter projects, and I'm actually really surprised that this is the only book from Brandon Sanderson that is on this list. And I kind of expected at least one of his other Kickstarter books, specifically Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. I thought that one probably would have been on here, which is why I didn't read any of them prior to this project. This is another adventure story, and so I think that if you liked Adventures of Amina Ali, you would also like this book. They have some kind of similar vibes, some pirate stories. And this book is kind of a gender-bent Princess Bride story, and it's about a woman whose childhood lover, childhood best friend ends up getting kidnapped, and she has to go on the grand adventure to go save him. This story has such a cool start to it, such a interesting and unique premise. This book was kind of written for his wife after they were watching The Princess Bride, and Brandon's wife kind of mentioned like, hey, I love this story, but I wish that Buttercup was like more of a badass. And I love that that's like, this was the love letter that he wrote to his wife after that conversation. It does take place in the Cosmere, but I have not read any of the Cosmere books, and this is a standalone, and I was told that like you're not going to get spoiled for the Cosmere. It's like if you know where the Easter eggs are, you'll see them, but if you don't, you'll just kind of assume that it's part of the world. So I am going into this book as it's a standalone. I would love to start the Cosmere, but that's a 2024 problem. Hi, it's a rainy Sunday morning, and I am going to try to read all of Tress of the Emerald Sea today because it's a pretty short book. I think the audiobook is like 12 hours long, so like I'm not doing much today other than watching football. So I am excited to just like knock this book out today. And so far, I'm only on like chapter 8, which I think is like 10% of the way into the book, but I'm really, really enjoying the writing style here. It's been comped as like a gender flipped Princess Bride, and I really agree with that so far. Not even like the plot of the story, but just the writing style, because the narrator breaks the fourth wall a lot, and it reminds me of this like storytelling aspect that is so prominent in the Princess Bride, and like how the grandpa is like reading to the grandson. And I'm seeing little snippets of this, and it was like, because it's talking about like the world, and it was like explaining this sea that is not water, that it's like this pollen that they have to go on, and that's how the boats float, is on this pollen and this dust. And they're like, and then there's this like little tangent, and it's like, how many other worlds have you been to? Maybe your water is the freakish one. And like, that's just so great. And then there's some really quotable lines in here that is very similar to how the Princess Bride has some very quotable lines, right? We all know that. My favorite one so far has been, a terrible idea executed perfectly is better than a perfect idea executed horribly. And like, a mood. So anyway, it's raining, so I'm gonna go in, and I just had to go pick up some groceries for Thanksgiving stuff. But yeah, I'm gonna touch base with you. I normally like to touch base at 50%, and I just thought I needed an earlier snippet for this book. So here we are. Okay, I'll go. So I'm coming to you a little bit later than 50%. I'm about 75% of the way through now, because as we were getting to the 50% mark, I am struggling with this book now. I mean, I was loving the writing style, and I kind of still am. I'm still liking the writing style. I think it's unique, and I like the storytelling aspect of it. But one of my least favorite things in fantasy is the journey type of book. And this is very much a journey type of book. It's kind of got like Adventures of Amina Ali vibes, but like more cozy. That's what I'm feeling like this book is, because she's on this ship. She's not like, you know, with a bunch of pirates. So yeah, it's, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this book yet. But I'm kind of bored. I feel like this book is taking forever to finish. Like I started this book today, like this morning. Brittany and Leandra were doing sprints all day long. And like, I should have been able to finish a 320 page book in all day long sprints, right? But I didn't. So that's why I don't know, I think that's why I'm struggling with it. I'll still finish it tonight. I'm going to probably stay up. It's 9 now, and I think I have like an hour and a half left at my listening speed. So I'm going to take a shower, then I'm going to fold my laundry, because I didn't do that today. And I'll just finish it out before I go to bed tonight. I don't know, I'm liking it less the more and more I go on, and I'm sad about that, because I really wanted to like this book. When I started, I was like, oh, this could be a 4.5 star, like it wasn't 5, but like it could be a 4 or 4.5 star book. And the more I just wanted to be done. Like, there are parts, there are shining moments in this book, but like for the most part, this book is just boring. Sorry if you love this book. Okay. I'll talk to you when I finish it. Hi, I finished Trust of the Emerald Sea last night. So let's talk about it. I really wanted to love this book. I really, really did. But I'm going to give it 3.5 stars. This book is too cozy for me, so I think that this definitely has an audience, and so if you're not an epic fantasy girly, like, this actually probably might work for you. I think if you liked Legends and Lattes, Miss Percy's Guide, if you like Princess Bride, like, this is the book that I will recommend to my friends that don't necessarily read a lot of fantasy. But if you read a lot of fantasy, I don't think that this is going to be a book for you. I don't think you're going to like this one. That's fine. Like, books can have different audiences. This one, it's just not me. Like, it's probably my least favorite Brandon Sanderson I've read. Now, I haven't read all of them. Like, I've only read 3, maybe 4 of them at this point. But it's probably my least favorite of his. But it's not what I'm looking for in a fantasy. And that's fine. Because I definitely know that it's going to find its audience, and I know that there are people that love, love, love this book. That being said, let's talk about the points that I'm giving it. So for characters, I'm giving it a 5. I just thought they were fine. Like, I liked the narrator point of view more than anyone else, and that one, well, that's not really a character. I'm giving the plot a 5 as well, especially in the middle. Like, it sagged bad. It's the fantasy equivalent of a road trip book, which we know is not my favorite. So that's a me thing. The world building I am going to give a 7.5 to. I talked about this earlier at the beginning. I really, really liked the way that they broke the fourth wall. They talked directly to the reader, and the narrator was my favorite character, even though it's not really a character. And kind of in that same vein, I'm giving the writing an 8. So that's exciting. And then in enjoyment, I'm going to be giving it a 6. With an average score of a 6.3, Tress is going to fit into the second spot behind Fragile Threads of Power, but ahead of The Adventures of Amina Ali, just barely. The next book that I'm going to be reading is going to be Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. This is a gothic fantasy horror, and it's about a woman who is trying to take care of her brother, so she goes and gets this job as a housekeeper for what is essentially a haunted house. The house is beyond haunted though, it's actually like sentient. Now the house is owned by one of her favorite authors, or an author that wrote one of her favorite books, The Underland, and the house is full of mysteries and it's spooky, and she's going in just to make some extra cash, but also to learn more about the author that she has kind of been obsessed with over the past several years. I have read everything else from Alex E. Harrow with mixed results. I've really liked some of her stuff, especially her retellings of Sleeping Beauty. I really like that duology, but there have been some other books that I haven't liked as much, like The 10,000 Doors of January, and I've heard that this one is kind of more similar to that than it is her other stuff, so we will see how this goes. Hi, we're going with a really moody look right now because I don't want to turn on my big lights, so we're just gonna go with this. I am 50% through Starling House by Alex Harrow, and I'm actually having a really good time with this. I am liking the vibes, I'm liking the moodiness of it. It's just, I'm having a good time with it. Like, it's creepy. So this is about a woman who is trying to get money for her brother, who is like, she has custody of him because their mother died in some mysterious way relating to the Starling House. And so she's trying to get money to send him to a private college, because the place that they live, not college, private like boarding school, the place that they live is riddled with like smoke and like pollution from this plant, like mill that is in the town. And so she goes to work at this Starling House as like a housekeeper, and she is starting to find out things about this house, and they're not great, right? They're not great. So it's hard to like talk about without spoilers. My only gripe about this book is that it's not a fantasy book. That's where like we start having this conversation about like if we're treating the Goodreads Choice Awards like SPFBO, this is not a fantasy book. And so you kind of like have to dock points for it. Like, I'm enjoying this book. I have an absolute feeling it will make the top 10, but it's not fantasy. It's a horror. Like, it's a gothic horror with this little whisper of fantasy, but it's definitely more in line with like a spooky book. Like, it feels kind of Darcy Coates-esque. So if you like those books, then this might be up your alley, might be your speed. Compared to the fantasy books that I am reading for this challenge, this is like redheaded stepchild kind of thing. I don't know, it doesn't feel like a fantasy in comparison with everything else that I'm reading. Like, this is definitely not Encyclopedia of Fairies or you know, Trust of the Emerald Sea, anything like that. Like, this happens in our own world. There's a lot of conversation of like things that are going on in our world. So like, if you go into this thinking it's a horror, then I think you probably will have a good time with it. If you go into it thinking it's a fantasy, maybe not. So anyway, that's what I'm struggling with, because like I'm having a good time with it, and this is like a moody aesthetic. Like, this book is a vibe, but it's horror. This book is horror. So anyway, that's my thought process so far. I'm actually probably gonna finish it tonight. I've got sprints running tonight, and so I'll probably just finish it then. So you might see me like in the same spot in a couple of hours. Hi, it's the next day. I forgot to film my vlog clip when I finished this book, but I did finish Starling House. Technically, I'm giving it a 4-star. I really liked this book. I think that it's really moody. I think the ending was phenomenal. There's not a lot I can talk about in this book without it being just absolutely a huge, massive spoiler, because it's tiny. And everything just kind of builds on itself. And this was like, if you're a fan of Darcy Coates, this is a book for you. If we went with the same points as what I would do for my normal rating system, because I use a very similar rating system that SPFBO uses for my own rating, it would be a 6.8, which would be the highest scoring book on this list so far, which is not a lot because it's still like only a 3.5. That's a whole nother conversation. But I'm just like, it's not a fantasy. And so I feel like I have to dock points for that. But the last time that this happened with SPFBO, I can't remember which year it was, but Combat Codes was docked, I believe, half points for it being kind of a sci-fi rather than a fantasy book. So that's what I'm gonna do, is I'm gonna dock half points. I don't think that's actually a rule for SPFBO, but like, I can't vote for this book to be the #1 fantasy book of the year because it's a horror book. If this would have been in the horror, we would not be having this conversation. This would be my vote for horror, but it's not, and it's like Goodreads messed up there, right? So it's gonna go down at the bottom of this list, and that sucks because I actually really liked this book. But I kind of feel like we could have the same conversation in romance, or like we did last year if you watched my Goodreads review video for that one. I really didn't think that Book Lovers was a romance. This one like is even less of a fantasy than Book Lovers is a romance. So there's that. If you're not a fantasy girly, like, you probably will still like this book because it's not a fantasy. It's not fantastic. Like, the fantasy aspect of it is the haunted house, like this almost sentient house. You have that in horror too, I guess. I guess more like technically haunted houses are usually like spirits and stuff within the house that make it haunted, and this is like an actual sentient house, but like it's a horror. And I think the reason why she gets put into fantasy is her past books have been fantasy, right? Like 10,000 Doors of January, whatever the witches one was, I can't remember. Definitely historical fantasy, right? And then her duology is like kind of sci-fi fantasy, but like definitely more fantasy. Publishers just try to push it into a like category because that's what the author has been in before. This is published by Tor, not by Tor Nightfire. Like, all of that goes into the thought process of like what genre it is, but at its core, it's not a fantasy. Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldree is the prequel to Legends and Lattes, which is kind of the book that skyrocketed cozy fantasy into the place that it is today. This is a book that I read just before the list of 20 came out, so I don't have vlog footage of this, but I read it in preparation for this video because I was pretty convinced that this was going to be on the list. Like I said, this book is a prequel to Legends and Lattes, and so this follows Viv as a young orc who was injured, and she comes into this town to rest and recover, but she's on the hunt for this powerful necromancer. This one I think has a little bit more adventure, more action than Legends and Lattes, but it still definitely falls into that cozy subgenre of fantasy. She spends a lot of time obviously in a bookstore where they are talking about the books and she's reading it. Like, there's a buddy read going on in this book. It's really cute, really cozy. The townspeople in here are just absolutely adorable. It's such a sleepy little town. But I think my biggest struggle with this book is because it was a prequel, I already knew what was going to happen. I wasn't really invested in Viv's journey because I eventually knew where Viv ends up and, like, you know, the events that happen in Legends and Lattes. And so I think that, like, this book does it a disservice calling it a prequel, because I think that this book should have been book 1 and Legends and Lattes should have been book 2. This takes low stakes to like a completely other level, but then at the same time there is some like adventure, some war, some battle, which kind of take it out of the cozy vibe. So let's talk about the scores that I would have given this had it been in the vlog. For the characters, I'm giving it a 6.5. The townspeople were my absolute favorite. The plot, I am giving this a 4. Again, I was never invested in the plot because I knew where it was gonna end. So it's kind of like when you watch Rogue One, but you already know the Death Star is gonna blow up. The world building, I'm gonna give this a 4.5, and I think that might be controversial, but it. I think it leaned so much into the cozy vibe that like we just like expected it to be cozy, but like I would have liked to see even more of the town itself. And also some of the scenes kind of had white room syndrome. The writing I am giving a 7.5. That's pretty good. It's above average. And if you do enjoy cozy fantasies, I do think that you will like this book still. And then for my enjoyment level, I'm giving this a 5. I didn't like this one as much as Legends and Lattes. And I think because I had read Legends and Lattes so soon before, like it was just like maybe a 2-week difference, I was comparing the two. And I think that might be one of its problems. So with an average score of a 5.5, this is currently sitting just above Starling House with its modified rating. But if we were talking about my own rating system of this, not docking Starling House for horror, this would be in last place. Next up, we have one of the heavy hitters of the YA fantasy category moving into adult fantasy with Swordcatcher by Cassandra Clare. And this is the first book in a new series, and this is her adult debut. She is well known for the Shadowhunters universe and all of the Mortal Instruments books, but going into not only a new age category, but like having that name recognition and going into a completely new series is quite the feat. This is a political fantasy about two people, one who is an orphan, and he is like at the basically state-run orphanage school, and he gets plucked out of his life and asked to be, or not asked, told he's going to be the sword catcher for the prince, which is essentially the body double. He's going to go into the situations where the prince could potentially have been assassinated, and he's going to stand in as the prince, and people will think that he is the prince. There's a little bit of magic involved in the fact that like there's an illusionist spell, and if you weren't close friends or family with the prince, you would think that the sword catcher is the prince. And then we have Lynn, who isn't part of an ostracized community for their magical abilities. They are not to be talked to. They're kind of exiled to the outer skirts of the kingdom. But after a failed assassination attempt, these two characters are brought together and caught in the web of the mysterious Ragpicker King and his dark magic. Hello, I'm here to bring you an update that I personally am so very excited to talk about, and that is that I am loving Swordcatcher. This is fantastic. I mean, I had high hopes for it because there were a lot of buzzwords that I thought I could like about it, but Cassandra Clare being like a hit or miss author for me, and then also an author that has been so well established in the young adult genre, moving to adult, historically has not gone well for me. If you think about my history, like for example with Terrasim, with City of Dusk, that felt so much like a book that went, like the author went from YA to adult and just like really struggled to cross that bridge. And I feel like, I mean, that's a hard bridge for authors to cross, and so far she's doing it. She's doing it. This is such a different writing style from Shadowhunters, and I love that because I do think that Cassie Clare has such a voice, and like she's a pillar of the YA fantasy, and so the like Shadowhunters is like has a cult following at this point. So for her to have such a different writing style, and for it to work so well as an adult fantasy, I will say I don't think it has the like epicness of George R.R. Martin or like Robin Hobb or like anything like that. It's definitely more of an accessible fantasy. There's not a huge group of characters. It's easy to follow, but it still has all of the buzzwords that I love. It has this very political backdrop. It has court politics. It has this like the brink of a war, the whispers of a war, and then also like this outcast group of characters, which is what our female main character is. She is this sort of witch, and like this whole group of people have been cast out because of their magic. But then the prince and the sword catcher, who is essentially the prince's like bodyguard, body double, they do have to go to her to get some, you know, healing, because traditional medicine is not working, and so they have to go to this magic. I think it's very, very well written so far. Sandra Clare has a history of overwriting, and I think so far, even though like this is a chunky book, it doesn't feel overwritten. It doesn't feel like we're getting unnecessary scenes, and I don't know if that's partly because it's a brand new world, and so like I'm just eating up the world building, but this is the front runner so far of the books that I have read, and I don't know that anything has the ability to top it, so we'll see. But I will come back to you when I finish this book. Guys, I think this book might make my best books of the year list. I am so excited that I got a book that I absolutely loved in this list. Obviously we're not done yet, but this one like kind of came out of nowhere, and I'm giving it 5 stars. So that's exciting. This book kind of came out of nowhere. I had like mediocre expectations for it. Like I figured I was gonna like it, but I didn't know I was gonna love it like this. I gave it 5 stars, but let's talk about the official scoring and go from there. Obviously it is at the top of this list. If you are a fan of political intrigue, court politics, some backstabbing, I think like this is a weird comparison, but I think that if you liked City of Brass, you'll like this book. I know that feels like a little bit, I don't know, like I don't know if I love that comparison, just because like this is a Eurocentric story and City of Brass is not, so I don't know if I love that comparison. It's not an apples to apples comparison, and obviously comparing Eurocentric stories to marginalized community stories or non-Eurocentric is not always the greatest way to do that. In fact, it's not a great way to do it, but I feel like from a writing style perspective, from a like an aesthetic perspective, and like it's just like it has a lot of the same check marks, and so if you like one, I think that you'll like the other. So like not comparing the stories, that's I don't know, I don't want to compare them, but if you like one, you'll probably like the other. Sorry, Doyle is snoring, and so if you hear him, that is why. Characters, I'm giving an 8.5. Plot, I'm giving a 9, which is very high. It's the highest one on here. World building, 9.5. Chef's kiss. This is so good. Writing was a 9. I think I might have said this before, but I think that like had we not said this was a Cassandra Clare book, I would not have actually believed you. It feels so different from the Shadowhunters, and it's such a different writing style, but it was so worked for me. And enjoyment, I'm giving a 9.5. Like this was 9s across the board, almost. So the score being a 9.1, and obviously being in the front, in the lead. We love that. Cannot recommend this book enough. It's probably going to be on my best books of the year. I know it's maybe some recency bias to it. This was so good. This was so good. I'm in a rental car, so this is gonna look really funny because this car doesn't have like the spot that I normally put my phone on to do my car updates. But I need to talk to you. I am about 30% of the way through Day of Fallen Night. I actively hate this book. Like, I don't care. This book is entirely too long for me to not be caring. I'm well over 250 pages in, and I actually couldn't tell you what the plot of this book is, and that's a problem. And I don't think it's because I'm too dumb for this book, or I'm listening to it too fast, or what. I don't think that's it. I just think that this book doesn't know what the plot is. It's meandering so much. I am okay with big books. I mean, I just finished Swordcatcher and I absolutely loved it, right? And this technically is only like 200 pages more than Swordcatcher. So like you can have a big book, but like make the words mean something. And I don't know, like, are there too many characters, too many points of views? Is that the problem? I don't know. I do think like my number one criticism of this book right now is actually the writing style, and I think it's really pretty, right? It's really pretty. The choice of words is nice. Like, it's very pretty. It's a very pretty book. The prose is gorgeous, but because it is so pretty, the writing feels so detached from the characters and from the story that is happening in this book. And because of that, I'm not connected to anybody, and I actually don't care what happens to anybody in this story, which is a really bad problem to have when I still have 600 pages of a book left. And like, maybe it will turn around, but I think at this point, like, I'm just mad at the book. Like, I'm just mad that I have to waste so much time reading this book. And it's not ending well. It's not gonna end well. That's where we're at. I am not DNFing any of these top 10 books. I'm not doing that. So I am going to finish this book. But like, I don't care. I don't want to finish this book. But I'm going to. I'm gonna do it today. I'm gonna finish it today. I think I have like 9.5 hours left of the audiobook. So like, we are going to bear down and finish it. It's the final day of November. There's a ton of sprints happening for the end of Get a Clue Readathon. So like, I will be productive today. That's nice. There's that. I haven't had nearly enough coffee. For some reason, it's taking me much longer to drink coffee these days. And like, normally I would have this completed, but I didn't. Like, by the time I got to the office. But anyway, I didn't. I'm gonna go to work. And it's really dark and gross today. Like that, not fog, haze. Sometimes living in Utah in the winter sucks, but tomorrow it's supposed to snow, so we should clear all this out. Okay, have a great day, guys. Hi. It's been a couple of days since I've talked to you, but I have finished Day of Fallen Night, and now I am moving on to Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. And I just realized I have something in my eye, so just pretend that that isn't there. Okay, so let's first talk about Day of Fallen Night, because I don't have a lot of thoughts about it. Plus, I kind of already talked about it in my November wrap up. But I also have a snack. I went to Swig. My go-to drink right now is a Fresca or a Sprite. If you can do either one, I just like Fresca better. With cranberry and then fresh orange. It's very holiday. It's very seasonal. It's delicious. It's so good. Like, it's kind of summery, like, cause the orange kind of makes it summery, but then the cranberry like makes it winter. It's just fun. And then I got some little pretzels, and so we're just gonna have a snack, and we're going to talk. Also, they had little Christmas ornaments, and so I got one because they're adorable. We're gonna do a little unboxing. I don't know if you wanted to see this, but like, here we go. Look how cute this is. So like, if you don't know about Swig, which like, they're kind of popping up all over the country, but they started in Arizona and Utah. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. They're very much known for their tumblers, and they like will have new tumblers that come out, and they sell out super quick. And so that's like their little ornament. So anyway, let's talk about books. Okay, so Day of Fallen Night was a chore to read, for sure. It was not a good time. I gave it 2 stars. So in my rating, like my rating system, it's sitting here. I'm not looking at my computer, so I don't know what the actual numbers are. But here's the breakdown of the points of like what I gave each section. And then here's where it's sitting, which is down at the bottom. Like, yeah. Like it was, I'm so sorry to all the Priory lovers. I thought I would love this one. I did not. It was too long, for one thing. Like, it did not need to be this long. The thing is like, it's touted as this standalone fantasy, and it's like, even Day of Fallen Night says that it can be read as a standalone, right? It's a standalone that is part of this larger world. But why didn't we just make it a trilogy? You know what I mean? Like, and focus on different characters in each one of the stories, because there was so much going on in that book that at some point you just stop caring because you can't connect all of the dots. And that was my problem. That like, about halfway through, I'm just like, I don't actually care anymore. And then we kind of got this little romance that kind of came out like out of nowhere almost. They weren't the badass lesbian dragon riders that I wanted them to be. So there's that. Okay, well anyway, 2 stars. Let's move on to the next book. Next up, one that I think probably should have been in the romantasy category, and that is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. This is about a grumpy old professor and her hunt to like explore the Fae Kingdom and learn as much as she can. She's considered the foremost expert on fairies, but as she travels into this Fae land and the Fae Kingdom, there are more and more secrets that are unveiled and more mysteries afoot. There's also a man in here that is why I think we should have a romantasy instead of fantasy, but he is her academic rival and he manages to charm the gruff townsfolk, and she kind of like hates him for it. This is another one of the cozy fantasies that are on the list, and cozy fantasies are definitely having their time in the spotlight. Unfortunately, I'm not liking Encyclopedia of Fairies. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia for Fairies, of Fairies, whatever this book is called. I don't understand the point of this book, like at all. And I don't know that this book understands the point of this book. It's very lost. Because first off, it's got more of a romance than any one of these other fantasies, so I don't know why it wasn't put in romantasy, and it was like, I don't know why it's in fantasy and not romantasy. I've heard from people reading the romantasy books that Assistant to the Villain should have been in fantasy. It's not a romantasy. So like, why didn't we just swap these two books? That made more sense. Anyway, and it's trying to be this like cozy book, and I think like it's giving Miss Percy's Guide to the Care and Feeding of British Dragons. What is it with the long names? It's giving those vibes. We kind of have this like grumpy older woman who is like touted as the leader of the fairy. Like she knows a lot about fairies in the academic world. And then like her colleague is this like absolute ray of sunshine. So it's kind of a fun like reverse Grumpy Sunshine. But like those aren't tropes we should be talking about in fantasy, right? Especially with the addition of a romantasy category. If we didn't have a romantasy category, fine. That's whatever. We can have those conversations. But we do. Which means that like fantasy shouldn't be, the romance shouldn't be the main part of this book. That's just my thought. It's trying to do this like romance. It's trying to be really cozy. But then there's like some really, really dark moments. And it's such a jarring like transition between these like cozy moments and like just talking about academics and stuff like this and like being really soft, and then this very dark disturbing thing. So I don't know, this book just, it feels like it lacks definition and it lacks an identity. And that's where I'm struggling. I can see people liking this. What I don't understand though is the hype for this book, because like everyone and their mother loves this book, and I might give it 2 stars. So yeah, we're gonna finish it today, but that's where we're at. So anyway, I don't know where to go from this. I've liked 2 maybe books in this whole series so far, so I don't know, like I'm struggling. We are on the struggle bus. But yeah, anyway, I'm gonna talk to you when I finish this book. And I'm gonna finish my snack because I can't eat and talk at the same time. Okay, we're doing a phone clip because I don't want to get my entire camera out tonight. But I finished Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I didn't like this. I think like my sentiments are pretty much the same from this afternoon when I was telling you about it. But like, what is the point of this book? Like, why the hype? Why is this getting so much love? I can appreciate that cozy fantasy is getting a resurgence and like it is having its moment in the sun. But I don't even think that this is the best cozy fantasy book that is out there by any stretch of the imagination. It's fine. The book is fine. I think I'm going to give it 2.5 stars, but it's like maybe even 2 stars. I don't even know. But let's talk about my ratings. I'm giving the characters a 5. They're fine. Like I don't know how to talk about this book. My sentiments are the same from earlier in this vlog. Like I don't think expanding upon anything is going to do you any good. If all of that sounded good the first time at 50%, it's gonna sound good now. So like characters are 5. They're fine. I think they play their role fine. You have this like curmudgeon-y professor that like thinks she knows everything about fairies and then come to find out she doesn't. I'm giving the plot a 4 because honestly like I didn't know what was going on half the time, and it was just so like It was so all over the place, and I think like it started out as this cute, cozy academic fantasy, and then it went off the rails. Went off the rails at some point. The world building I will give a 6.5. I think it's at least like above average. It was a fun little, like, you know, the fairy world is always interesting, and if you like the lore of fairies, this might be a book for you. It's just 100% not a book for me. This is why I don't film on my phone anymore, because if somebody calls me, then I have to stop filming. But anyways, I'm gonna give the writing a 5. I didn't like the footnotes. I didn't think they were important. I didn't think that they were necessary. And the way that they did it in the audiobook is you couldn't really tell it was a footnote. It just like felt like a tangent rather than having a different narrator. So didn't love that. And then enjoyment was a 4. Like that's just, it was a below average book for me. I didn't like it. And then as far as my rankings, technically this should be at the bottom. This is my least favorite book of all of them that I have read. But with the docked points of Starling House, because I feel like it was more horror than fantasy, I guess it'll technically be in the place above that. The Unmaking of June Faroh by Adrienne Young is the second adult fantasy book that Adrienne Young has written, the first being Spells for Forgetting, that I believe made at least the top 20 the year that it was written. Now this is one of those books that's a little bit confusing because it is generally shelved as general fiction or historical fiction, which makes me curious about it and makes me think that there's not going to be a lot of fantasy in this book. This is a book about a woman who has a family curse, and the women of this family can sort of time travel. They're given this power that they can walk through this portal door into a different time period. There's also a murder mystery in here that's a story of family. It's multi-generational, and she's uncovering all of these family secrets as she goes along. She did not have a very good relationship with her mother. Her grandmother raised her, but when her grandmother passes away, she uncovers all of these secrets, and things kind of unravel as we go along. Hello, I am here to talk to you about The Unmaking of June Faroh by Adrienne Young. This was the one I was actually not as interested in because I was told that it was kind of usually shelved as fiction, and so I was like, okay, well, it's gonna be like a very low fantasy, and it's, you know, gonna be literary, it's, you know, more historical fiction, whatever. To everyone's surprise, including my own, I am loving this book. I didn't know what it was going into it, like literally no notes, hadn't really looked at any synopsis. And so this is about a woman who, her grandmother dies, and there is some sort of mystery, some sort of secret about her family history, and she ends up like finding pictures of what looked like her mother in like 1911, which obviously that doesn't make sense. But time travel. This book has time travel in it, and I am very much enjoying it. I'm having such a good time. I've been listening to this book all day, and I'm having such a good time with it. I'm really like struggling to like figure out how I recommend this book, because it has like this mystery in it. There's like a murder that they're trying to solve, and then like back in the 50s, and then like it's got a little bit of fantasy to it. Like it's a very light fantasy, right? So it's like more historical, because like the main time period that we're focusing on, at least right now, is the 1950s. And so like that's, you know, it's kind of historical fiction, but like some magical realism in it. I don't know how to recommend this book, but all I know is I'm like enjoying this. I'm sitting here I'm on sprints. I'm building a little Lego bookshop. If you've been around my channel for any length of time, you know that this is my new little obsession. It's so cute. So yeah, I'm listening to this audiobook. I'm having a good time. I will say that the time travel aspect to this book is lacking in logic. There's not a ton of logic to it. It's like the door appears and she's able to like decide which period she's going to go to or what year she's going to go to based on her locket, but then like she's stuck in the 1950s, and also you can only go through the door 3 times in your life, but then like she can't find the door even though she's never gone, like she's gone through it now once, and now she's stuck in the 1950s. It's a whole thing. So the logic is not 100% there yet, but like, I don't know, this is just a vibes book, and I'm living for it. So this is a surprise to literally everybody, because I really was not expecting to like this one very much. I had put it off to the end, towards the end, because I was afraid of this one not doing, or not enjoying it. So anyway, I'm really liking that. I have 4 minutes left of the sprint, so I do need to wrap this up, but I will finish it tonight. So I'm having a good time. Okay guys, this book came out of nowhere. I had very low expectations for this book because I had heard very mixed things. I've never tried this author before, and I really thought it was going to be a little bit too, I don't know that whimsical is the word. I actually think it was going to be not fantasy enough for me because it's generally shelved in general fiction. And then, like, it's very light fantasy, and I don't think that I could recommend this book to fantasy lovers. But I think if you like murder mysteries, if you like historical fiction with a little bit of magical realism tied into it, this is where you're gonna like, that's who is gonna love this book. And I don't know why, but this was just, it was so engaging, and I had a good time reading it. I read it all in one day. Like, I'm sitting here at the end of sprints, and like, it was so good. It was so good. So let's talk about the categories and the scoring of it, like just for official, you know, purposes and stuff like that. Personally, I gave it a 4.5, just in my own personal rating scale. And so while it's not beating Swordcatcher, I do think that it's still going to be a fantastic score. So for characters, I'm giving him an 8. I don't know, I really liked these characters. I empathized with them. Like at the very end when she has to make a decision about something, it's kind of spoilery, but she has to make a big decision, and I was just like on the edge of my seat hoping that she would make the decision I wanted her to make. Yeah, okay, so anyway, characters I gave an 8. Plot I also gave an 8. Like I said, it was page turning. I was engaged the whole time. There was not a single part of this book where I was bored. I was not like, I wanted just to continue listening to this book. I read this all in one evening almost. And while it's not a large book, like 319, I was very close. I don't know how else to talk about this book. It was such a surprise for me. And like a good surprise, a pleasant surprise. I'm happy. So yeah, I'm gonna give the world building a 6. I feel like that was probably its weakest point, specifically in the logic portion of how the time travel worked, because it was like the character can go through the door 3 times, but like then a different version can go through multiple times, but wouldn't she have already gone through it in the past? Like, I didn't understand the mathematics of the time travel. Like, it was an interesting way to go about doing time travel, but it felt like it was too easy. And then it was like the only reason she couldn't go back to her normal timeline was because the door wasn't like available, but that had never happened before. And so then there was no real like explanation as to why she couldn't find the door, or why it wasn't appearing for her when it always had in the past. That's the only like flaw, and that's why personally it's getting a 4.5 instead of 5. I think if a book can hold my attention the entire book and like make me want to continue reading, and like I am in this, not really a slump right now, but like I've been reading all of these big, heavy, chunky books. And so there have been times where it just kind of feels like a slog. Not one page felt like a slog. And then enjoyment, I'm giving it a 9. I'm giving it a 9. There we go. Which is only half a point under Swordcatcher. So, total score is going to be a 7.9, and that is going to put it in second place right behind Swordcatcher. Finally, the last book on this list is Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. Now, I read Ninth House earlier in the month in preparation for this because I knew that this book was going to be on the list. I had no doubt Leigh Bardugo is another one of those heavy hitters in the fantasy genre, and Ninth House won in 2019, so this one has a strong chance of winning the whole thing. This is the second book in the Ninth House series, and it kind of follows the continuation of Alex's journey at the end of Ninth House. I don't want to give you a huge synopsis of this book in case you haven't read Ninth House and you don't want to be spoiled, because this is a direct continuation of it. And obviously, as the title implies, we're going to hell a lot in this book, trying to undo or fix the things that happened at the end of Ninth House. This is a dark academia fantasy, which I have not read a lot of in the past, but I really enjoyed Ninth House when I read it. This is kind of one of the exceptions for the rule of SPFBO of like you can't have sequels. I guess obviously technically that rule does not apply to Goodreads, so this book like wouldn't necessarily be in the SPFBO competition if it, you know, if these were all self-published books. We have to fudge the rules a little bit on that. Okay, we are starting our final book for this project. It's coming down to the wire. It's fine, don't worry about it. And that is going to be Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. I saved this one for last because I was just in the Ninth House world, and so this is one that I was like really excited to get to, and as you probably saw from some of the other ones, they were duds, and I wasn't as excited to read it, but I knew that if I had one that I was like excited to get to at the end, then you know, I'd be able to push through. It worked in my head, okay? So, I started this one a couple of days ago. I had to put it down for other things, but now we are back into it. I am a little over 100 pages, 123 pages into Hellbent. And so far, I'm really, really enjoying it. This book is messy, like even more so than Ninth House. So I gave Ninth House 4 stars. And I think like the ending of it was 5 stars. The beginning of it was where it was losing me. This is a vibes book. Again, Ninth House was a vibes book. This one is even more so. It's really giving that season from Lucifer when like he's in hell, because like obviously we're making trips to hell down here, and I'm just like I'm getting that atmosphere, that vibe from it, and like Lucifer's one of my favorite shows, so like the fact that we're kind of getting this dark, disturbing, the dark blues, I don't know, that's just what like my brain is picturing. I don't think it's actually what it's describing, but that's just how I'm picturing things. But like Alex is a mess, and she knows it, but like we're just here for it. And Leigh Bardugo has such a way of writing where like the chapters end on a cliffhanger. You want to continue reading. Like this is a page-turning book. I'm just ready for this to end on a good note. I'm ready for like my heart to be broken maybe a little bit. I don't know. I hate the cover. Like quite literally hate this cover. I'm glad I got the red. It's way better than the silver one, but it's not my favorite cover in the world, but that's fine. This isn't a cover contest. That's a different thing that SPFBO does. But anyways, I'm going to continue reading this. I would love to be able to finish this today. I don't have a ton to do today, so I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to read this book, crochet. We're just gonna have a great day. So I will check back in with you later. Hello, it is Wednesday, December 6th. The finalists have come out. It's 8:30 at night. And so we're going to react to them. I kind of want to make my predictions, but I don't know which one's going to win. Like I feel like it's going to be Swordcatcher, Hellbent, or Trust of the Emerald Sea. Those feel like the top 3. Like I don't think Fragile Threads of Power will win it, just because like since finishing it, I've heard a lot of people that have said like it's not their favorite of her books, and I just feel like Cassandra Clare is more of a prominent author than V. Schwab. I don't want to like compare. I'm like, that feels weird, like comparing 2 women. Anyways, that's my guess. I can't give you any any more definitive. It's one of those 3. Let's go check it out. We're on Best Books. I'm not gonna go through all of them. We're just gonna look at fantasy for right now. Hellbent. Interesting. I mean, that makes sense. That makes sense. The only reason why I wouldn't have thought that is because it came out in January and it's a sequel. Leigh Bardugo is back on top with Hellbent, the winner of this year's fantasy category. Not coincidentally, the book is the sequel to Ninth House, which was 2019's winner of fantasy. Okay, that makes sense. Bardugo's beloved series has established a new trajectory for dark academia books, promising Ivy League hopefuls a world of secret societies, occult rituals, and interdimensional portals. I love that. Okay, so it got 75,000 votes, almost 76,000 votes. That's impressive. And then Trust of the Emerald Sea being second. That makes sense. Day of Fallen Night being third. That does not make any sense. And Encyclopedia of Fairies getting fourth. I don't understand that. I do not understand that. I didn't like that book. Oh my gosh. Like, I don't understand the hype. Okay. I should probably turn this on so like light happens in my general vicinity. Then Bookshops and Bone Dust. Okay, that makes sense. The Fragile Threads of Power, and then Swordcatcher. See, I was wrong. I was very wrong. I wonder if it's because Cassandra Clare, like that book just came out. But Bookshops and Bone Dust just came out too. I don't know. I mean, obviously I loved Swordcatcher, so I'm sad. The Adventures of Amina Ali is next. And then rounding off the top 10 is Starling House and The Unmaking of June Faroh. That makes sense. Starling House is not fantasy. And The Unmaking of June Faroh is, I didn't even think was going to be on the top 10. So to make that, now we can actually see 11 through 20, which is cool. So Stoneblind was 11. Mark Lawrence, The Book That Wouldn't Burn is 12. Inkblood Sister Scribe is 13. Clytemnestra. Then The Will of Many. Then Atalanta. There's so many Greek mythology in here, or Greek retellings. The Last Tale of the Flower Bride, Victory City, Witch King, and then Cow. Okay, well, Hellbent is the winner. I'm gonna send this back to do the outro of the video. All right, we have finished the list. I finished Hellbent, and that means that we're done with the Goodreads Choice Awards. I've read all 10 of the finalists. On a personal rating scale, I'm giving this a 4 or a 4.5. I'm not really sure. I think I enjoyed it more than I liked Ninth House, but I think a lot of that is just because I understood more of what was going on in this book than I did with Ninth House, because like for literally half of the book it was just like, well, I'm here for the ride, but this is a vibes book and I don't know what's going on. And because we were in the same world and because I had read them very close together, I kind of knew what was going on with this book. So let's talk about the scoring that I gave this book. For characters, I gave them an 8. For plot, I'm giving it a 7. I do think like I was still very confused for a lot of this book, and it's very much a vibes book. And I think that Dark Academia may not necessarily be the subgenre for me. I don't necessarily love it as much as I wish I did, honestly. I want to love Dark Academia, but I think for so much of it, I get so confused. So I'm giving the plot a 7. I am giving the world building an 8. I loved the scenes in hell. Like I was here for that. And even the scenes that we had at Yale and like in the mortal realm, you could just feel the moodiness of it. You could feel the darkness, the cold, the winter. Leigh Bardugo is so good at imagining that world. Writing, again, I am giving this an 8. I was very engaged with this book. I read it in like a day and a half. Something like that, once I like actually sat down and got to read it. And it's very page turning, it's very engaging. And kind of for that same reason, I am doing an enjoyment score of 8 as well. So that gives it an average score of a 7.8, which just barely puts it in my 3rd place ranking, just behind The Unmaking of June Faroh. So the winner has been announced, and this is kind of fitting for me to end with Hellbent, because this is the winner of the Goodreads Choice Awards for 2023, and I don't think there was any surprise to that. Swordcatcher is my favorite and the book that I voted for. I absolutely love this series. I will 100% be picking up The Ragpicker King, which is the 2nd book in this series. When it comes out, I will be waiting on the edge of my seat for it, even though I'm sure it probably won't come out for like 2 years. Knowing, I mean, with the size of these books. But I am happy that Hellbent won. I am happy to see a book that I really liked win out. I kind of had my predictions, and you know, I was right. And I'm really happy to say that there were some books that I really loved in this video that were in the top 10. Yes, there were some duds for sure, and I think that this just goes to show that Cozy Fantasy and we're not on the same page. We're not on the same page, and I don't love Cozy Fantasy as much as, you know, as the general public seems to love it, because books like Emily Wilde's and Bookshops and Bone Dust just were really big misses for me. But I had 4 books on this list that I gave 4 stars or higher, and so I'm counting this as a win. And so even though Starling House for me I think was a horror and was in the wrong category, and I think she was pigeonholed into the fantasy category because that's where she's lived in the past, and personally I think it was a horror, and so according to like my rankings, if we were doing this SPFBO style, wouldn't have gotten a great score. Personally, I still gave the book 4 stars. And Swordcatcher is going to end up on my favorite books of the year. There's no doubt about it. I loved this book. So I know we give Goodreads a lot of crap, and we kind of hate on the Goodreads Choice Awards just for their lack of diversity, which like 100% was a problem this year in not just the fantasy category, but a lot of categories. But this experiment for me was a win. I kind of found what I like in fantasy and what I don't like in fantasy, and it'll kind of give me a clearer path going forward. I've really only read fantasy books, like predominantly fantasy, for the last couple of years. I definitely started out my channel as a romance booktuber, and this is the first year I think that fantasy might have the edge on romance as my most read genre. And so having a little bit of a clearer path going into 2024 and knowing what I like and don't like in books is going to be very helpful. So I'm calling this experiment a win. That's all I have for you. That's a wrap on the Goodreads 2023 Choice Awards video. Let me know down in the comments below a book that you wish would have been on the Goodreads Choice Awards, because I do think that there were some missed opportunities in here. I think that there's probably better fantasy books that did not make this list. So let me know what you think should have made it. And if you're not feeling chatty, do a sword emoji. That's all I have for you today. If you are new here and you have not yet subscribed, there is a little button that you can do so down below the video. If you'd like to hang out with me more, the links to my Instagram, Goodreads, Twitter, and my Patreon are linked in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.